Hello, I'm Bas Hamer from Possum Labs, and today we'll be talking about defaults, and I'm making the assumption that you are building your solution based upon the PossumLabs.DSL.Core package. So let's hop over to the tutorial in Visual Studio. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about here is as follows, right? We have a user and we have tickets, and a ticket requires a user. Now, what we would like to do in cases where we don't care about the user is we want to just say, hey, just create a ticket and then pull in a user where needed, right? And this is one of the particular uses. Another use of it is that we can specify a default user when we don't need to. So for, when we don't need to specify any of the details around it. So for instance, we have here the example below, given the user for U1, and then we log in as that user. Now, if we don't care about the details of this user, what we could say is the following: given logged in as user default, or we can say given logged in as user. This is what the framework supports, just to simplify things. Now, this is only a single level of hierarchy. We have users and tickets, well, two-level hierarchy, I guess. And in real applications, this may be like 4 or 5 levels deep, and this is where defaults really allow you to cut down on the clutter. Places where you would use defaults is in cases where you don't care about the specifics of the piece of data that you're creating or the piece of data that you're utilizing. So if you don't care about the specifics of a user, you don't refer to the user, then you should be fine to do this. But in cases where you actually do care about specific attributes of the user, for instance, like what security permissions they have, you should not be doing this. So what you see over here is getting back to the user through our ticket. That's not ideal. It'd be better if we actually care about the ID of the user, that we actually just specify the user so that people understand exactly what we're talking about, so we don't dive too deep in our dot notation. So let's take a look at what we have to do to support this. So we'll go over to our users. So the thing that's important in our users is the following down below, which says that we initialize a default. This is a delegate. So this only gets called when somebody actually requires the default, right? So in the first example where we didn't use defaults, this method would never get executed. But in the second one and all the other ones, it would. So what we're doing here is we just create a new object. We specify that we want to call the create user method. This doesn't do anything right now because it's just a test example. And then we return our user. So that's all we have to do for this. That's pretty simple. And then if we take a look at our ticket, we specify the following. We say null coalesce with default. That's the proper C# term. You can also use this other attribute. It does the same thing. This other attribute is called default to repository default. Never made up my mind as to which one is nicer. The first one is more English. The second one is actually the behavior. It's very descriptive for people who understand what the words means, but very few people understand what the word means, so I let both of them sit in there. But by slapping this attribute on this property of user, it understands that it will utilize a default for this when it's not being specified. Now down below we have our create tickets, right? This looks a lot like what we had before. We apply template, but now we also decorate the item, and this decorate is the part where it figures out all of the objects or all of the properties that are null that have that attribute, and then it will populate those with the defaults, and then it still does the add down below. Oh, and it applies characteristics as before as well. So that's really all you have to do to make use of this. It's not very exciting for a simple scenario like we're dealing with here, but in more complicated data scenarios, which we'll be talking about later on, it actually provides a lot of value, as you can default multiple levels deep in your hierarchy, and we'll take a look at what you have to do to make those things work. Hey, thank you very much for your time. Please let me know in the comments below if you have any feedback on these videos. I'd love to hear from you.